Naturalism, 1890 to 1910. Naturalism is specific to the United States. The idea of naturalism is that it attempts to apply scientific principles of objectivity and detachment to its study of human beings. It focuses on the brute within of each individual, and it views nature as an indifferent force acting on the lives of human beings. The dominant theme of naturalist literature is that persons are fated to whatever station in life their heredity, environment, and social conditions prepare them for. The power of primitive emotions to negate human reason was also a recurring element. Some known writers of this period were Edith Wharton and Jack London. Modernism, 1900 to 1940. Modernism in English literature includes the Edwardian period, 1901 to 1910, and Georgian period, 1910 to 1936. Edwardian period, 1901 to 1910. It is named for King Edward VII and spans the time from Queen Victoria's death, 1901, to the beginning of World War I, 1914. During this time, the British Empire was at its height and the wealthy lived lives of materialistic luxury. However, 4/5 of the English population lived in squalor. The writings of the Edwardian period reflect and comment on these social conditions. For example, writers such as George Bernard Shaw and H.G. Wells attack social injustice and the selfishness of the upper classes. Other writers of the time include William Butler Yeats, Joseph Conrad, Rudyard Kipling, Henry James, and E.M. Forster. Georgian period, 1910 to 1936. It refers to the period of British literature that is named after the reign of George V, 1910 to 36. Many writers of the Edwardian period continued to write during the Georgian period. This era also produced a group of poets known as the Georgian poets. These writers, now regarded as minor poets, were published in 4 anthologies entitled Georgian Poetry, published by Edward Marsh between 1912 and 1922. Modernism provided a radical break with traditional modes of literature. The authors of the modern period have experimented with the subject matter, form, and style and have produced achievements in all literary genres. Poets of the period include Yeats, T.S. Eliot, Dylan Thomas, and Seamus Heaney. Novelists include James Joyce, D.H. Lawrence, and Virginia Woolf. Dramatists include Noel Coward and Samuel Beckett. The Lost Generation, 1918 to 1940. In American literature, the group of writers and thinkers known as the Lost Generation has become synonymous with modernism. In the wake of the First World War, several American artists chose to live abroad as they pursued their creative impulses. The artists of the Lost Generation struggled to find some meaning in the world in the wake of chaos. These included the intellectual Gertrude Stein, the novelists Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald, and the painter Waldo Peirce, among others. Harlem Renaissance, 1918 to 1930. During this time, many African Americans migrated from the South to northern cities, seeking economic and creative opportunities. Within their communities, the creative expression became an outlet for writers, musicians, artists, and photographers, with a particular concentration in Harlem, New York. It marks the rise of black writers such as Baldwin and Ellison. This is the time when African Americans received formal education. Postmodernism, 1945, present. Following World War II, 1939 to 1945, the postmodern period of British literature developed. Postmodernism blends literary genres and styles and attempts to break free of modernist forms. Postmodernist literature has the common themes of new forms of war, the rise of multinationalism and capitalism, multiculturalism, and information age. The Beat Generation, 1948 to 1960. In the American 1950s, a new cultural and literary movement staked its claim on the nation's consciousness. The Beat Generation was never a large movement in terms of sheer numbers, but in influence and cultural status, they were more visible than any other competing aesthetic. They advocated personal release, purification, and illumination through the heightened sensory awareness that might be induced by drugs, jazz, sex. The Beats and their advocates found a joylessness and purposelessness of modern society sufficient justification for both withdrawal and protest. Beat poets sought to transform poetry into an expression of genuine lived experience. They read their work, sometimes to the accompaniment of progressive jazz music. Confessional Poetry, 1958 to 1965. Confessional poetry is the poetry of the personal. This style of writing emerged in the late 1950s and early 1960s. The confessional poetry dealt with subject matter that previously had not been openly discussed in American poetry. Private experiences with and feelings about death, trauma, depression, and relationships were addressed in this type of poetry, often in an autobiographical manner. It is associated with poets such as Robert Lowell, Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, and W. D. Snodgrass. Post-colonialism. Post-colonialism, the historical period or state of affairs representing the aftermath of Western colonialism. The term can also be used to describe the concurrent project to reclaim and rethink the history and agency of people subordinated under various forms of imperialism. It is a critical analysis of the history, culture, literature, and modes of discourse on the Third World countries in Africa, Asia, the Caribbean islands, and South America. Post-colonialism concerns itself with the study of the colonization, which began as early as the Renaissance. The decolonization, which involves winning back and reconstituting the native cultures, and the neo-colonizing process, an aftermath of postmodernism and late capitalism, when multinational corporations control the world. Focusing on the omnipresent power struggles between cultures and the intersection of cultures which results in multiculturalism and polyvalency of culture, post-colonialism analyzes the metaphysical, ethical and political concerns about cultural identity, gender, nationality, race, ethnicity, subjectivity, language, and power. The literary periods and movements. If you have questions, ask them in our forum.